Welcome back to another episode of Low Tech Garage, and we are back on the 928 S4 project today. And for those of you that are new to the channel, this is our 1991 Porsche 928 S4. It is in awesome condition, but it had spent quite a bit of time with very limited use, and so we are going through and doing a complete mechanical restoration and refurbishment on this. We're doing new gaskets, timing belt, you name it, so this thing is good for many years to come. And in the last episode, you will all remember we got the oil pan removed here, we got the engine cross member out with the motor mounts out, and I left you guys saying I had a lot of cleaning to do. And I have spent longer than I would like to admit working my way around the underneath of the car, trying to remove any grease or grime that was generated from the oil leaks that we were dealing with. So when we put this back together, everything is factory fresh. And equally, if we do have a leak in the future, we can pinpoint it nice and easily. And one of the things I did over the last week is organize this parts shelf so we can kind of stay on top of what we're working on and what needs to go back on the car. And for today's episode, we are going to be working with the oil pan. We got our brand new gasket. We have our motor mount brackets, cross member in the back. And then up here, we have our brand new motor mounts. The heat shields are all clean and this isolator all going back in. And now when we look on the side of the block, you'll notice we are pretty much oil free. There are a few little areas I'll continue to clean up as we go through this process, but compared to how it was when we started, we have a nice, clean aluminum block that everything is going back together on. And equally on the accessories, this is not perfect, but I have got a ton of dirt off of this, the brackets and everything. Again, just trying to get this as close to factory fresh as possible. And as we continue to dig into the car, when I get the opportunity, I will continue to clean this more. But overall, things are starting to look really good, nice and dry, and exactly how we want them to be putting parts back on this beautiful car. And that leads us to step one today, and it's a little counterintuitive. Obviously, we're putting the oil pan back on as one of the first steps. However, as I've told you guys, I am also gonna be doing the cam belt, water pump, tensioner, all that jazz as we're going through this. And there's a component that is pretty easy to get to right now that's part of that job that we're gonna remove. And that way it will make our life just that little bit easier once we move on to the timing belt. And that's gonna be our alternator over here. As you can see, quite like the rest of the accessories, I had cleaned off some of the bottom here, but this is kind of how dirty it was all over when we started the project. And after doing some homework, it seems that the alternator assembly needs to be removed in order to get access to the cam belt for that job. And I thought, well, it's right in front of my face. Now's the perfect time to remove it. So I'll get you guys set up and let's get started. Okay, so step one, we gotta get this belt off right here. So we have to just undo the adjuster so we can get some slack and get the belt off. There she goes. All right, alternator belt off. Maybe a comment for folks doing this job. This is not a factory 928 Porsche alternator. This is an aftermarket one. This was done as an upgrade by the previous owner. So once we get it off and on the bench, we can take a look at it, see what it is. I mean, I guess the alternative if I can't get this, is we'll drop the alternator down. And then undo it after. Okay, we got the 8 mil. I think this is off. Yep. We have one little guy right here. This blue guy, that's off. And yeah, we're gonna focus, I think, on actually taking the whole alternator off now. So do this for you guys. I'm gonna take this nut off here, and actually the bolt I was undoing at the top, there is a nut on the back, so I need to do that. But that should allow me to drop this down, and then we can easily get to this 12 mil. So 17. Let's see if we can get this. Okay, should come out. We have a pretty massive power steering pump leak, so I guess we'll be addressing that as we go through. Here we go, the bolt right here. The head's all the way back here. Managed to sneak it past the lower radiator hose, but yeah, just being a bit of a challenge. So we have to be very close. There we go. That's what we're dealing with. And now I think we're out. There it goes. Okay. Wow. I don't know if you guys can even see, but we have got the alternator out. But like I mentioned, guys, greeted with yet another leak. This appears to be coming from the power steering pump. And looking up, it's coming from higher up on the pump. So I may do new crush washers on the banjo fittings just because I have access, but I'm gonna have to look from the top and see where this is coming as well. All right, guys, well, I did not expect it to take me half an hour to get an alternator off when it was staring me in the face, but here we are. It is out. It's another thing off the list, and I think we're pretty much ready to put the oil pan back on. And just so you guys can see, this is the alternator in question. I will look for a part number and I will tell you what it is once I figure it out, and we're putting it back in as part of the reassembly. But as you can see, it's in good shape. Bit of a bear to get out, but it's out, and now we can get on with the project. All right, well, now I've got the alternator out of the way. This is kind of what I was talking about. This whole bracket assembly is over the corner of the lower timing case, and I have a suspicion in order to access this and do the timing belt, this is gonna have to be removed. So what I realized before putting the oil pan in, the oil pan juts forward and comes down here, is probably in my best interest to get this bracket removed, which is gonna involve undoing the leaky power steering lines here, which I guess in the grand scheme of things is maybe not that big of a deal after all, and it'll allow us to clean this all up. We have to get this belt off the power steering pump. And I feel like in the end, to do this timing belt job, these other belts are probably gonna all have to come off too. So I'm gonna set the camera up and I'm gonna get cranking on this, try and get this stuff off and out of the way. I think this is a logical next step before I get this oil pan back on. All right, well, a little bit of a messy job, but we have the power steering pump and bracket out. Show you what we have and where some of the leaks were coming from. Now I've got it on the bench. So here it is. This is the bracket assembly. So what you do here is you use this to tension the belt, and then you tighten up all the hardware on the power steering pump to hold it in place. In my case, these were finger tight. This one was done up, but these were just completely loose. So glad we're doing this. As you can see, like everything else under here, lots of grease and dirt from these oil leaks, and in this case, power steering leaks. All of this is pretty nasty, so we're gonna clean it up. And as I did a little more inspection, I realized actually all the nastiness on the power steering hoses, I believe the copper crush washers, they looked extremely small. So I think maybe someone's been in here before and maybe just not put the right crush washers back. So we'll replace those when we put this all back, clean this all up, make sure the pump's good, and we'll be good as new. And the nice thing, as anticipated, with this out the way, now we have full access to the timing belt cover, specifically the lower portion, which is great. We have to get this belt out the way. And as we can see, kind of what we were talking about, all this dirt kind of tucked up here, right here, here, on the power steering lines, on these oil cooler lines. We have great access to do more cleaning and just get this thing as factory fresh as possible. So I'm gonna jump over to this side. Really, the main goal here is gonna be get the belt off, and we can get this one out the way. We also have the smog pump up here. I wanna get this off, get all these belts off where possible and out of the way, and just make sure we have sufficient access for when we're doing the timing belt. So this has turned into a little bit of a side quest, but I think this will make my life a lot easier when we move on to the timing belt as the next piece of this project. Well, it appears the 928 was kind to me on that side. It was not too bad to get those remaining belts off, and we have a lot more space under the car. So let me show you where we are, and then I think we are truly at the point of getting this oil pan back on. So we have our AC compressor. We have a little more room to do a bit more cleaning. Our smog pump up here, which it seems okay, but there's kind of a little noise, so we have to figure out we're going to retain that or not here relatively soon. I certainly don't want that thing failing. I just went through that on my truck. But yeah, we are free and clear on this side. No more belts on this side. And everything has way more access at this point. So this leaves us with the exposed bottom end. What I have already done, I have wiped all of this down. I have also gone through every bolt hole, and I have cleaned it out with brake clean to make sure there is no oil in there at all. And all of the hardware has been washed in my parts washer and is nice and clean. It still retains its nice factory zinc coating and is in great condition. And for the 928 diehards, you will recognize that this is not a factory oil pan gasket. From the factory, they're cork like the one we removed, and over time, as we saw, they leak, they get hard, they give you issues. So Roger from 928s R Us has hooked me up with this modern version, and I'm excited to get it back on the car. So to do the oil pan, my plan is this. I'm gonna get the pan itself snaked up over the steering rack. I'm gonna get the gasket in place, and then we are going to get a couple bolts started just to hold everything in place. And then we have the fun procedure of putting what appears to be close to 30 bolts. It might be a little less, but certainly a ton, all in around the perimeter of the block. I am gonna use a little bit of thread lock. The reason for this, like I said, I found that my motor, all the oil pan bolts were finger tight. Something to do with, I assume, heat cycling and also the gasket becoming brittle. But I do not want to find myself in that situation here. So I'm going to put a little bit of thread lock on each one of these. They don't get done up tight anyway, but just to ensure that this is good for many years to come and we don't find ourselves with an oil pan leak in the future. All right, so here we are. Oil pan, obviously, like I said, we ran that through the parts washer and then blasted it with brake clean so it is nice and clean in here. We have the new gasket. And what I've done is just put a few zip ties through the holes so that this doesn't move while we're trying to snake it up into place. and then that way we can get hardware bolted in, you know, and should make our life a little bit easier with the install. So we're gonna take this over and yeah, get it up over the power steering rack, get a couple bolts in, and then as you can see, all of these, we have to run the hardware in, do thread locker, and then go around and kind of torque this up. It is something like 6 Newton meters. It's very light torque, but nonetheless, we should do it so that the gasket seals properly. All right, folks, well, I realize there's not a great view to show you guys with the steering rack in the way. It kind of makes it a little obtrusive, but I think this is probably the best place for you guys to watch this. You can obviously see the oil pickup here, the whole bottom of the crankcase and everything. So we're gonna come in with the oil pan, snake it up and over the steering rack, get a couple bolts in just to hold it in place, and then we will start the installation process. All right, well, let's go for it. Got something. Okay, we're gonna switch to time lapse and get the rest of this in. Well, that certainly took a lot longer than anticipated to get all those bolts in and torqued up, but the oil pan is in with this new gasket, all the hardware is in, and it is the very first part to go back on the car during this project. And just to give you a glimpse, here it is. Everything is looking mighty clean, and that means we're on to more new parts going on. And it's a little chaotic on my bench over here, but we have the cross member that we removed in the first video. We have it all degreased, so there's no more oil or any buildup on it. It's nice and clean. Then we have brand new motor mount. These are the ones supplied by Roger. These are a little bit taller. I know they will compress a bit with the motor, but this will actually raise the engine up slightly. Online though, lots of good reviews about these. Gives you a little better ground clearance on the oil pan as well. So we're gonna start the process of getting these installed. And then with that, obviously you have to get these little heat shields back on the cross member and get this whole assembly back under the car so that it is supporting the motor again. So it looks like a few parts, but it certainly wasn't easy to get all of this out. So I have a suspicion it might be a little bit challenging as we do the reassembly process, but I'm gonna start with getting some of these motor mounts prepped. All right, well, it's probably gonna be a little cramped up in there, so I thought I'd show you what I've got going on. This is the top mount for the motor mount. I've just tightened that up on here. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna leave the bottom plate off for now. We're gonna come under the car. And if you recall, this is the pocket that the motor mount sits in. And so I'm going to get this up here, like so. And it will be basically like this. I'm gonna get the hardware put in as step one. All right, so there we have it. As you can see, these bolts are extremely loose, just kind of finger tight. But this is done intentionally so that we have the ability to have the mount pivot like this, because in the end, this stud has to go at a slight angle into the cross member. So we want that maneuverability. Once we get a little closer to putting the cross member in, we'll put the lower plate on too, and it's got the little hook that goes on right here to just kind of support everything as well. So I'm gonna work on actually mounting up the next motor mount. All right guys, well here it is. The cross member is assembled. Put the little heat shields back on. I know those are gonna make my life a little challenging, just trying to squeeze everything in, but I wanna make sure these are back in their factory location. Then on this side, obviously the heat shield back on, motor mount on. It is loose, but it's in place. And yeah, there's like a little insulator mat that will slide on here and stuff before we start getting too crazy. A few other things. We also have to pull some of the wiring through. But step one now is going to be, can we slide this up under the front control arms and basically get this mount in place up in the pocket in the engine? And then equally, what can we do to get the one we did finger tight into this hole over here? And I'm going to be honest with you guys, this is definitely going to take a few stabs to get it done. I'm going to set up the camera. I'm sure you'll see me take this thing in and out a few times, but I will let you know if this method worked, what did work for me when we get it up and in there. I was on the brink of giving up and I made some progress. I will tell you, it is not an easy task wrestling these motor mounts in, but I'll show you where I'm at, and then when I move over to the other side, I'll show you what I did to kind of make this work and make it viable for at least me doing this over my head. So first and foremost, here we are on the driver's side, and yes, that's a motor mount. You can see right up here, I have a bolt threaded in. And then if we come underneath, just loosely, I have just the nut holding this in place. Again, this is all just kind of loosely in place because we have to do the other side still. And then if you look up here, the cross member is sort of in line where it needs to go. And the control arm is pushed out in front right now. And here's a peek from the front. Again, we have a bolt in. I can do it by hand, but it's threaded in. So we are basically in on this side, which is a huge milestone. And what I did is I changed my approach. I took both motor mounts out. I actually worked on getting the cross member up first and loosely in place with one bolt holding it into the frame, extremely loose. There was a lot of movement. And then I basically lowered the subframe down as much as possible so I could sneak the motor mounts up and in. And here I am on the passenger side, and this is what I'm talking about. So this one bolt right here is threaded in a little bit into the frame. In this case, we have the bushing kind of resting on the cross member. Hoping that doesn't give me too many issues here as we move forward with trying to get the mount in on this side. As you can see, when it's like this, the pocket here is way too small. So I'm gonna have to undo the subframe and basically swing it down to make enough room to sneak the motor mount up and into place. I will say the nice thing about this though, the passenger side is probably a little bit easier because you're not dealing with the steering column where it comes down. It is very tight in there trying to sneak the heat shields around as well. So I'm a little hopeful that maybe the passenger side will be a little more kind. Equally, I'll show you how I set up the motor mount so that it would actually go in there and work, because a lot of the time I wasted was trying to get the stud to line up into the cross member itself. And I finally had a creative solution that seemed to do the trick. All right, and here's the creative solution. Holding this lower motor mount plate on is a little challenging. The angle it likes to sit when the nut is not on, it makes it very challenging for this dowel to go into the cross member. So what I did is I tightened it down with the nut, and then I zip tied it like so, and it basically holds it in place and allows me to snake this up over the cross member, and there's enough thread on the alignment dowel to get it in. All right guys, it's in. As you can see, I do not have all the hardware in yet. I need to go around and put all the last bolts in, but the cross member is attached to the motor mounts on both sides. Right now we have this significant gap between the frame and the cross member. I want to make sure I have all this hardware in on the mounts itself and it's snugged up there, because I don't want to put any leverage on these ears on the castings. So I'm going to get that all done on both sides, and then revisit the cross member and its relationship to the frame here. Kind of like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, these mounts are expected to actually lift the motor up a little bit. So as you can see, I have this wood here, and my intent is, once everything's tightened up, to slowly jack this until everything is up and flush against the frame. All right, guys, well, I can't believe I'm actually saying this, but the cross member has a couple bolts threaded into the frame. The motor mounts are bolted to the block and to the frame, and we fundamentally have this all reinstalled. So here is one of our bolts into the chassis. Obviously, this is not exactly how this goes, but this is locating the cross member. You can see we still have a good inch or more to raise everything up. And up here, we have our motor mount, which is securely bolted to the engine. And under here, you can see the stud of the motor mount with the nut just spun on loosely. Obviously, we have to do some work on the hardware with this as well. And the story's the same on this side. We have a bolt in, and we have the motor mount in as well. And of course, the stud peeking through here. So this is a huge milestone. It just took a lot of fiddling around. And once I had the mounts basically attached to the cross member and the block, I slowly used a jack under the cross member, and I've been slowly raising up the entire motor and powertrain and slowly bringing it back up to the chassis. And that's right here. So we have the tow eye hooks. Y'all remember where I disconnected and let them swing down out the way. So those are all, they've actually been removed now, cleaned, degreased. And then these on the end of the lower control arms, gave them a quick wipe down again, just to get all the stuff off of them. So we are going to mate all this back up. So this will go basically like this. The bolts up through here, the control arm and into the chassis. And then we got one bolt up here as well. And by doing that, that will help align the rear bushing. It'll get it up in this pocket. And like I mentioned earlier, this is just kind of holding things in place. We'll need to remove this and then put the lower piece of the lower control arm bushing mount in, and then we'll run the bolts back up through this, and it'll lift everything up where it needs to go. So sure, that sounds like a few bolts, but I have a suspicion if it goes like anything else on this car, it's gonna take me a little bit of time. Okay, so this seems to be par for the course with this, where we kind of have to pull everything up halfway, not exactly how it goes, just to line everything up. So what I've done is I've left the tow eye bracket out. I've got one bolt started and it's holding the lower control arm roughly in location. And what that's doing on this side is now this bushing is pretty close to where it needs to sit. We need to just shimmy it around a little bit, but we're talking maybe like 1/8 of an inch. I have the whole cross member supported with the jack. So I'm actually gonna drop this bolt out and I'm gonna put the lower bracket on now that kind of holds this bushing in place. And this will be the beginning of kind of pulling the control arm and more of the cross member up and into place. All right, guys, well, we are back. And as you can see, some progress has been made. In the time lapse, you may have seen, I was running into an issue where the cross member would not sit up high enough to allow me to start these bolts right here. And it took me a little while racking my brain to figure out what the heck was going on. So let me show you what I was battling. And once I resolved it, I was able to just push the cross member up a little bit higher and get these bolts started. These all need torquing still, but they're just sort of in place locating the control arm. Our friend, this bolt right here, there is a bracket above it that slots into the cross member. It is a pretty tight fit, and basically what I had going on was the cross member was just slightly off location-wise, and it was pushing on the bracket instead of slotting in. However, once I got that slotted in, I was able to jack up the cross member like this, so it was actually touching the frame of the car. And it took a little bit of wrestling and just really aligning the bushing here so it would sit up in the pocket. And then I was able to start these by hand. And also just started by hand, I have this bolt here, so we still got some play, but we have both bolts up top. I think I mentioned I cleaned all of this off as well, so it's nice and clean and degreased. Obviously wipe this off. And then as we come around here, we have this bolt started as well. So I'm gonna hop over to the passenger side. I will set you guys up. Hopefully we don't run into any more roadblocks now that we've overcome getting the cross member seated. You guys can see me get this other control arm in, and we will be one step closer to getting this thing back on the ground. All right, guys, well, we have rear bushing the cup on, and we have the tow eye also on, bolts in. These are done up, so all located front and rear. And that brings us back under the car. And next steps, I'm gonna get this starter wire. It needs to feed up through the cross member up in this top corner here. We're gonna pull it around, and then it's gonna sit right here, and then the wires come straight back to the starter. So I need to pull all that through. There's a couple clamps to hold it in place. We're gonna do that next. Then we're gonna hop right under the cross member, and we're gonna torque the lower motor mount nuts up nice and tight, because once you put the power steering rack in, these are not accessible anymore. And then from there, our rack will tuck back up into the cross member. We'll put the lower bracket on the steering rack, and I think that's where we will be pausing for now. So quite a few little things to do, but really worth doing this to put as much of the car back together as possible now with the motor mounts in place, and it'll just save us a bunch of work here in the future and get us one step closer to getting the front wheels back on this thing and putting it back on the ground here temporarily. There we go. Oops. Wow, guys, somehow I didn't completely destroy the camera, so I will take that as a win. Nice. So, starter cables in place. We'll pull them over the steering rack, because soon this is going to be going back. And over to the parts washer, where we are cleaning all the hardware for the power steering rack. This was super greasy from all the oil pan leaks and all the grease and grime that was trapped with the under bracket. So we're gonna run this through for a few minutes, give it a nice clean so we have nice and shiny hardware. And here's all our nice and clean hardware. So we'll take it over to the car and get it installed. All right, guys, well, we have the steering rack up in place. We have this lower bracket holding everything where it needs to go. I have not done the rack itself up yet. This is loose. There's a bolt up here we need to do that kind of ties us to the cross member. Got a little dirt here. I'll probably clean that because, you know, we're just kind of going all out with getting this clean. But all of a sudden, this is feeling a lot less daunting and looking a lot more complete and refreshed. All right, guys, well, I forgot to hit play when I was doing this, but I reinstalled the sway bar. As you can see, I've cleaned this all off. I think we started that before we took it all the way out. And then I have it reconnected here. So these bolts to the frame, 34 foot-pounds. These, 60 foot-pounds. Don't know if you remember, but I had to use a 6-foot breaker bar to undo these. I don't know who did these last, but they were way, way over tight. So 60 foot-pounds here. We got the sway back in. Did a little research on the lower control arms. You need to torque these once the car has got the full weight on it. And as we've got more work to do on the car, we're gonna leave these for now. And once we put the car properly on the ground, we'll torque these up with the weight of the whole car on it so that it has the correct preload. And honestly, that goes for the front ones up here as well. So these are gonna stay put for now. And for the rack bolts, so these big guys, these are 34 foot-pounds as well. So got those all tightened up. I think you saw me get this guy in. I put the bolt back in here on the steering U-joint, so that's locked in place as well. Yeah, that really leaves me with this, and I have this on both sides. I gotta tighten these guys up. I will let you know the torque once I get them done. But then I think we are pretty good to go with having the full cradle in and torque to spec. I am also gonna just put a single bolt here on each side just to lift the exhaust up so the weight isn't just sagging. And then we can get the car lowered down, and actually I think we'll be ready for the next step. Oh, and I did decide I am gonna put the new copper washers on and put these banjo bolts back in, because I know as soon as I put this down, it's gonna just continue leaking power steering fluid, and I've really spent many hours trying to clean this and get rid of the leak, so I just want to get this handled while I'm at it. All right, I noticed I made a little bit of a mistake with reinstalling the starter cable. It wasn't apparent because I didn't have the steering rack up at the time, but this is not supposed to come over the top of the rack here. It's actually supposed to come down through the side here. So I'm gonna try and pull this all back through. I'm sure it'll be a little bit of a challenge now, and route it back down here, and then it'll kind of partner up with this ground strap. And I think that will solve the issue I was having for some of the access to the last hardware as well. All right, guys, well, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think we are done with the motor mounts and oil pan. So let's take a peek underneath the car, where we're at, and where we're gonna be wrapping up for today. So like you guys have seen already, fully cleaned up, reinstalled oil pan, brand new gasket up in here, brand new motor mounts right here and right here. And what I noticed, the motor is sitting at least 3/4 of an inch higher than it used to. So I don't know if that's just the new mount design or some sag that my old ones had. I've now corrected the starter cable and the ground cable with the clamp. I went back and looked at my old pictures, and we can see everything. It's in the right place. And we have the steering rack all bolted in as needed down here. Sway bar is in and torqued. And here's just a little bit better perspective. So everything's looking a lot more dry and clean. The dirt, the oil, everything has been removed, which would help us with oil leaks in the future and just making this car look a little more factory fresh underneath. So this is a huge milestone, and I will say this is a big job. It probably took me 10 hours of work. Some of that, admittedly, was all the cleaning and degreasing that I dealt with. I wanted it to look nice and factory fresh under there, and that takes time. But beware, there's a lot of stuff that has to come off. I highly recommend you be patient, take your time, be methodical, but you can do it. So this is phase 1 on the 928 complete. Next up, we're gonna be tackling the timing belt, the water pump, the tensioner. So you saw in this video, I took a few things off, kind of prepping for that. Specifically the power steering pump and the alternator, got those out of the way, started to make room so we can access the timing case and covers when we get on with the next video. And if you're new to the channel and found your way here because of the 928 content, don't you worry, there's plenty more of that to come. And for my longtime followers, we've got the red Corvette back in the shop, and it is gearing up for some love again here very soon as well. And as you guys can see, I am super close to hitting 10,000 subscribers. So please help me out, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. It makes a huge difference for me, and then you won't miss out on any of my content coming out here very soon. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.